Tonight, the King 5 investigators exposed a government contractor at Hanford that disregarded evidence that nuclear waste was leaking from an underground tank for nearly a year before investigating it.
And it's not just any tank. This is the one that holds the most deadly waste at the entire Hanford site near the Tri-Cities in eastern Washington. King 5 investigator Susanna Frame joins us now with the first report in her series, Hanford's Dirty Secrets.
Jan and Dennis, the contractor is based in Richland. It's called Washington River Protection Solutions, or WRPS. The federal government pays that company a lot of money to keep the public safe from millions of gallons of radioactive waste at Hanford. But we've found WRPS looked the other way when faced with scientific evidence that they had a major problem on their hands.
You're looking at one of the most scenic stretches of the Columbia River, undammed for 50 miles, a sanctuary for endangered wildlife, spawning salmon, and toxic waste. The country's most dangerous nuclear dump, just 200 miles away from Seattle.
Hanford is the most contaminated facility in the United States and one of the top 10 in the world.
In 1943, the federal government began producing plutonium at Hanford. The main goal? Fuel the world's first nuclear bomb during World War II. By the 1980s, all plutonium production stopped at the site, but the government left behind a mess. The largest and most complex environmental cleanup effort in the world, with the worst of it sitting underground in massive tanks. For 25 years and counting, the race has been on. Get rid of the lethal junk in the tanks before it leaks all the way to the Columbia.
And if anything bad happens out there, Seattle will feel it.
And last year, the U.S. Department of Energy told us something big. For the first time, one of their double shell tanks was leaking, found during a routine, regularly scheduled inspection of the tank known as AY-102. And they released these photos. Radioactive and chemically lethal sludge oozing out of the main tank.
The fact that a double shell tank is leaking at the Hanford site is a game changer.
A major blow for sure. The double shells were supposed to be the toughest tanks around, the best shot at making sure the most deadly gunk wasn't going anywhere for decades.
It contains literally trillions and trillions of lethal doses of radiation in that waste.
Remember how the government told us they discovered this major problem during a routine inspection? That everyone was caught by surprise last year.
We found that's not true. The evidence shows the contractor in charge of the tanks, WRPS, headquartered here in Richland, ignored strong evidence the tank was leaking for nearly a year before doing anything about it.
We knew that we had a severe problem.
Mike Geffrey has worked at Hanford for 26 years. In 2011, he responded to an alarm on AY-102. Leak detection equipment sent up signals that waste was escaping from the tank, leaking into what's called the annulus, the space between the main tank and the outer shell.
I mean, we never guessed in a million years that we're going to have a double shell tank leak.
Geffrey and a coworker checked the equipment and saw this. Those white flakes in the middle of your screen, tiny signs of big trouble. What looked like nuclear waste dried up on the gear. Then, something from that part of the tank they'd never seen before. A reading of radioactive contamination.
It was very shocking for us, for both of us. We kind of just kept looking at each other like, wow, that's really hot.
At that moment, was there really any doubt in your mind that you had a leak?
Oh no, I knew right then that we had a leak, that something was wrong down there.
Geffrey reported the findings right away to his bosses, who had a different opinion. The detection equipment, not the tank, must be broken.
They just kind of sat there and they just kind of went, well, are you sure that thing's calibrated? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm the one that does the calibrations on it. I'm the one that takes care of it. Of course, I'm sure.
WRPS downplayed that first alarm. They reported to government officials that rainwater, not nuclear waste, most likely creeped onto that gear in the annulus. And the radioactive readings? They concluded it was simply leftover or legacy contamination from years ago. But King 5 found the company's own experts later discounted those explanations in a 400-page report. WRPS wrote the rainwater explanation seems problematic because of the radiation reading. And the legacy contamination theory, they wrote that area has been contamination-free since 1999.
Hanford has 200 square miles of contaminated groundwater. below the site there, and that is spreading over time because the contaminants in the soil are leaking at a constant rate into the into the groundwater.
I know this sounds incredible to people, but there are 40 miles of unlined trenches at Hanford, if you stretch them end to end, into which our federal government, your government, was dumping radioactive waste from nuclear weapons production and its own reactors until the year 2004, when we put those pictures on air and in our campaign literature for Initiative 297. It's been against the law for decades for a municipal government to dump in municipal garbage in unlined landfills, but our federal government thinks it's okay for radioactive waste, even though it seeps right out of those trenches, and that stuff is all moving through the soil to the Columbia River. What they're not telling the public is that they also deliberately dumped out of the high-level nuclear waste tanks in the 1950s and 1960s billions of gallons of liquids into the soil. And it is very, very toxic. It is radioactive. It includes uranium that with half-lives of hundreds of thousands of years, and plutonium and technetium-90 and strontium-90 and technetium-99, and all sorts of chemicals as well. And it's a witch's brew of deadly wastes, and it's all moving towards our lifeblood, the Columbia River.
This is probably the most dangerous stuff on the planet ever. Very, very small quantities of this waste. And it's been said that a Dixie cup full of this waste in a crowded restaurant, everyone would be dead in the restaurant inside of an hour. Even the amount that would fit on the leg of a fruit fly is considered a problem dose. And that's happened at Hanford. Fruit flies have landed on contaminated materials and then flown off to go to the lunchroom and deposit contamination on food and on tables and whatnot, and they've had to evacuate a 20-acre area at the Hanford site because of hot fruit flies and wasps. So this waste in these tanks is very dangerous in small quantities, and it has another feature, which is it's dangerous for very, very long periods of time. Bush administration intend to empty one tank per year, but do the math. 170 tanks left to go to empty out, over 100 years to empty out the tanks at Hanford. I mean, no way will those tanks last that long. I mean, one small earthquake out there could spell disaster for this region.
I think you said Hanford was getting for cleanup $2 billion a year?
Yes.
And I think that's...
Two big developments since we started asking tough questions about what is going on at Hanford. We've obtained a copy of a letter written by the top federal official who oversees the Hanford site. He's asking the contractor to conduct a full review of their management and practices in light of King's findings, and he wants the results in by August 1st. In addition, the governor's office is looking into how and why this happened.
We are going to be insistent that our federal partners be open and transparent with us to the extent humanly possible. So we are and will be reviewing what happened in this particular circumstance.
And coming up tonight on King 5 News at 11, more on our investigation, Hanford's dirty secrets. We'll show you the biggest red flags of all, warnings not taken seriously by the contractor that this tank was leaking.
This is one spot at Hanford the public is never allowed to go. Underfoot, the most hazardous material on Earth is brewing inside a 1 million-gallon double-shell tank.
This tank is holding the nastiest of nasty stuff at Hanford.
A year and a half ago, Mike Geffrey, who works for a Hanford contractor, saw what no one expected, evidence that tank was leaking. If so, it would be the first double-shell tank to ever leak at the site.
I knew it was serious because that's what my career has been for the last 25 years, is to monitor these tanks, to check for leaks. I mean, that's been what I've done.
Geffrey reported his findings to the top company guy in the field right away, WRPS manager Dave Strasser, who argued this wasn't serious, that rainwater, not nuclear waste, must have creeped into the space between the tank's inner and outer shells.
It was kind of just, we don't want to deal with it, Mike, just let it go.
Shut up.
Just shut up, just let it go. Yeah, just don't worry about it.
But Geffrey did worry about it as warning after warning rolled in. A leak detection alarm went off. A few weeks later, an air monitor spiked to the highest reading of radioactivity ever seen by current employees. 5 months after that, equipment got stuck to the tank floor, an indicator it was glued to sticky waste.
I complained a lot about it. I made a lot of statements of what are we going to do?
After all that, the employees here at Hanford came across the biggest red flag of all, something the experts say should have sent their managers scrambling to find answers.
A broken wire, similar to this one behind the glass, was pulled out of the space between the shelves. It gave off an extremely hot radiation reading, one that shocked the workers, but not the managers. They didn't call for more investigation. Instead, they kept to their rainwater theory.
It's hard to believe that you could get this much advance warning of a problem and not deal with it.
Marco Kaltofen is a top radiation expert located in Massachusetts. He's been to Hanford many times.
I really don't know what it's going to take. What is it going to take to get you to wake up and start dealing with a problem? Because problems do not fix themselves, and they definitely don't fix themselves at Hanford.
WRPS, the contractor hired by the feds to take care of all the tanks at Hanford, denied repeated requests for an on-camera interview, but they told us their experts disagree.
They said contamination readings were well below what would have been expected from tank waste, and that the alleged red flags were investigated and determined unlikely to be caused by a
his
leak.
WRPS bosses told him to conduct business as usual, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'd come home and be just frustrated and grumpy, couldn't sleep at nights.
He even considered ditching his long and successful career.
They took the fun out of it. This company took the fun out of my job. Just didn't enjoy it anymore. It's hard to go to work and to fight so hard to do the right thing.
But Geoffrey stayed on the job and was there to see this. Photos of not rainwater, but nuclear sludge oozing into the space. The pictures were taken during a routine inspection nearly a year after managers dismissed his first warnings. With human and environmental health on the line, nobody shoots from the hip at Hanford. Written procedures dictate everything. What protective gear to wear, when and where to put it on, how to calibrate every instrument. And some of the most important ones are called alarm response procedures, or ARPs. When an alarm bell goes off, that's the go-to Bible.
We have alarm response procedures for everything out there.
As it turns out, not everything. Check out this logbook obtained by King. On October 9th, 2011, a shift manager wrote the double-shell tank called AY-102 sent an alarm that it was leaking, but he didn't know what to do. He was unable to find an ARP. After that, managers for the government contractor, WRPS, sent their employee Mike Geoffrey out to check the detector.
I thought there would be a whole protocol of investigating, looking to figure out what's going on, maybe sticking cameras in and looking to see where the waste was coming from. I just assumed that was in place. Well, there wasn't any of that in place. There was nothing.
No plan.
No plan. Zippo.
WRPS officials disagree with King 5. They sent us a statement saying there is and has been an established alarm response procedure, ARP, for this leak detection system. We checked. We looked at all of the ARPs connected with double-shell tanks at Hanford. They've got one for high pressure, power supply failure, tank level alarms, and more. But nothing, not one ARP for alarms showing nuclear waste might be leaking from a primary tank.
So today, a WRPS executive told us he needed to clarify their statement that they didn't actually need an alarm response procedure, an ARP, because they had other plans that covered it. In fact, the company didn't have proper plans in place at the time, and they still don't. And this is important because this is not the only double-shell tank at Hanford. That company is in charge of 27 others filled with the worst waste out there. And our experts are telling us that because of that, they need an actual ARP on the books in a hurry in case it happens again.